Then there was brought to him a wise druid, who was skilled in all maladies of the mind and body. And after he had talked with the youth, he said to his mother, "Thy son is dying of the burden of a secret which he may not reveal to any man." Welcome everybody to the very first episode of the Irish Myths Storytime podcast. I'm your host, i.e. Kneverday, creator of IrishMyths.com and the Irish Myths YouTube channel. To any Irish folks tuning in, Céad Míle Fáilte. And as you can obviously tell from my accent, I am not Irish. And I'll spare you the whole speech about my Irish ancestors and DNA results because I'm sure you've heard enough Yanks yakking about all of that. What I will say to everyone listening, by way of introduction, is that I am from just outside of Boston. I grew up listening to and playing Irish music. I attended the Shamrock Elementary School. At 18, I moved to Montreal to study at McGill University, where I majored in humanistic studies and minored in world religions. But admittedly, I spent most of my time in an Irish pub, where I worked as a busboy before parlaying that role into the role of musician. For a while there, I was part of a 6-piece Celtic folk band, singing and playing the Irish bouzouki, guitar, bowron, and any other instruments I could get my hands on. So that's the background of someone who isn't actually Irish, who goes on to start a blog and YouTube channel dedicated to plumbing the depths of Irish and Celtic mythology and folklore. And while my content typically offers overviews of mythological concepts and or highlights specific mythological figures or mysteries, one piece that's largely been missing is the myths themselves. Whatever. That's what this podcast is all about. Each episode of Irish Myths Storytime will be dedicated to a single story pulled from the pages of Irish mythology that I will narrate in full. Moving forward, I'll open each episode with an ever so brief introduction explaining the origin of the myth in question and the version/translation I'll be reading. And for this inaugural episode of Irish Myths Storytime, I've got a real special one for yous. This is a story I tell my 2 kids at bedtime, with a few changes. It's short, it's sweet, and for the most part, it's self-contained. It's called The Secret of Labra. As far as I can tell, the story was first recorded by Geoffrey Keating in his 1634 masterwork, The History of Ireland. However, the title character, the High King Labra Lincha meaning the exile or the mariner, has been written about since at least the 12th century, appearing in the Book of Leinster. And of course, as Irish mythology was largely an oral tradition prior to Christianization, it's likely stories about Labra date back to many centuries before then. Now, I will be reading T.W. Rolleston's retelling of The Secret of Labra, which was published in the year 1900 in his book The High Deeds of Finn and Other Bardic Romances of Ancient Ireland. 2 quick clarifications are in order before we dive in. Firstly, while the king's name can also be pronounced Lowry, I've opted for the Labra pronunciation primarily because Rolleston spells his name L-A-B-R-A. Secondly, in the opening line of the story, you'll hear a reference to a, quote, certain voyage Labra made, and just for context, that's a reference to Labra returning from exile with a bunch of ships and men from Gaul and reclaiming his territory and kingship in Ireland. I could go into more of the background details, but that's not what I'm doing with this podcast. Head over to IrishMyths.com or check out my explainer videos on the Irish Myths YouTube channel if you want to journey down rabbit holes. This is Storytime, and now, your story. In very ancient days, there was a king in Ireland named Labra, who was called Labra the Sailor for a certain voyage that he made. Now, Labra was never seen save by one man once a year without a hood that covered his head and ears. But once a year, it was his habit to let his hair be cropped, and the person to do this was chosen by lot, for the king was accustomed to put to death instantly the man who had cropped him. And so it happened that on a certain year the lot fell on a young man who was the only son of a poor widow who dwelt nearby the palace of the king. When she heard that her son had been chosen, she fell on her knees before the king and besought him with tears that her son, who was her only support and all she had in the world, might not suffer death as was customary. The king was moved by her grief and her entreaties, and at last he consented that the young man should not be slain, provided that he vowed to keep secret to the day of his death what he should see. The youth agreed to this, and he vowed by the sun and the wind that he would never, so long as he lived, reveal to man what he should learn when he cropped the king's hair. So he did what was appointed for him and went home. But when he did so, he had no peace, for the wonder of the secret that he had learned preyed upon his mind, so that he could not rest for thinking of it and longing to reveal it. And at last he fell into a wasting sickness from it, and was near to die. Then there was brought to him a wise druid, who was skilled in all maladies of the mind and body. And after he had talked with the youth, he said to his mother, "Thy son is dying of the burden of a secret which he may not reveal to any man. But until he reveals it, he will have no ease. Let him therefore walk along the highway till he comes to a place where 4 roads meet. Let him then turn to the right, and the first tree that he shall meet on the roadside, let him tell the secret to it, and so it may be he shall be relieved, and his vow will not be broken." The mother told her son of the druid's advice, and next day he went upon his way till he came to 4 crossroads. And he took the road upon the right, and the first tree he found was a great willow tree. So the young man laid his cheek against the bark, and he whispered the secret to the tree. And as he turned back homeward, he felt lightened of his burden. And he leapt and sang, and ere many days were past, he was as well and light-hearted as ever he had been in his life. Some while after that, it happened that the king's harper, namely Craftony, broke the straining post of his harp, and went out to seek for a piece of wood wherewith to mend it. And the first timber he found that would fit the purpose was the willow tree by the crossroads. He cut it down, therefore, and took as much as would give him a new straining post, and he bore it home with him, and mended his harp with it. That night he played after meat before the king and his lords, as he was wont. But whatever he played and sang, the folk that listened to him seemed to hear only one thing. 2 horses' ears hath Laura the sailor. Then the king plucked off his hood, and after that he made no secret of his ears, and none suffered on account of them thenceforward. The end. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe, and depending on the platform, maybe go ahead and leave a review. Five-star review would be the best one you could do, but whatever, anything you do would be really nice. I'd greatly appreciate it. I've also got several books you can check out over on Amazon. Look for I.E. Kneverday. There's Irish Myths in your pocket, Samhain in your pocket, Irish Monsters in your pocket, St. Patrick in your pocket. Maybe you'd want one of those books. Who knows? As always, my name is I.E. Kneverday, editor of the short story anthology Neon Druid. Oh yeah, that's another book. I didn't mention that one. And creator of IrishMyths.com. Thanks for coming out.